Hello and welcome to the reading of Chapter 11 of the book Owls in the Family. Owls in the Family by Farley Mowat. We're reading Chapter 11. The spring when Weeps and Wool became 3 years old was a very sad spring for me. My father had taken a new job, so we had to leave Saskatoon and go east to the big Ontario city of Toronto. Ontario is another province in Canada, and Toronto is a city in that province. There would be no more sloughs, no gophers, no bluffs, and worst of all, no prairies in Toronto. I hated the idea of moving. But most of all, I hated leaving my friends behind me, both my human and my animal friends. We couldn't take Weeps and Wool because they would have had to spend their days locked up in a cage, and that would have been cruel. On the other hand, we couldn't just turn them loose either, because they had been members of a human family for so long they wouldn't have been able to look out for themselves. All we could do was try to find someone who would give them a new home. I talked to most of my chums about this, and they all said they were willing to take my owls, but their parents wouldn't hear of it. Then one day I thought of Bruce. He and his family had moved away from Saskatoon a while earlier and were running a fox farm about 200 miles to the northwest. I sat down and wrote Bruce a letter, and a few days later I got this reply. Dear Billy, it is pretty good here. There are lots of ducks, and we have started the fox farm and got lots of pups. Dad says, sure, I can have the owls. We have an old fox pen, and I'm fixing it up to keep them, and I'm building a wood house in it to keep them warm. Rex is healthy and says hello to Mutt, and says bring Mutt up here for a visit when you come with the owls. There's a lot of Indians here, and I go to school with a lot of real Indian kids. When you come, I will take you there, and you can ride some of their horses. So long, your old pal, Bruce. I showed the letter to my father. Sounds fine, Billy, he said. What do you say we drive the owls up to Bruce's place on Friday afternoon and stay over for a visit until Sunday night? I said yes, of course, and that was what we did. It was a wonderful trip to Bruce's. The sloughs were full of water, and the water was covered with ducks resting on their way north. We saw prairie chickens dancing on the sides of the road, and there were more meadowlarks and red-tailed hawks than you could shake a stick at. The owls rode with me and Mutt in the rumble seat, and they had a wonderful time. When we got to the farm, Bruce's mother had a big feed ready for us. On Saturday, Bruce took me to the Indian reservation to meet his pals. One of them, a boy about my age, named Henry Wildhawk, loaned me a cayuse. Remember cayuse? And the three of us rode all over the old prairie that day, chasing coyotes and jackrabbits on horseback. On Sunday, Bruce and I stayed around the farm, and I helped him finish the cage where Wool and Weeps would sleep at night. That was a sad business, though, and I kept wishing that Saturday could have gone on forever. Wool and Weeps didn't seem to suspect anything. I think they were having too much fun being suspicious. Wool went off and explored the big poplar bluffs behind the fox farm. And then we walked all around among the fox cages, hooting at the foxes and daring them to start something. Weeps found his way to the meat house, where the fox food was ground up in a big menacing machine, and the hired man fed Weeps so many scraps that he could hardly walk at all. Sunday night, we put the 2 owls in their new cage. Weeps was asleep almost before I could turn the catch on the door, but all of a sudden Wool seemed to sense that something was wrong. He gave a funny sort of hoot and then jumped over to the door and put his head against the wire mesh. I reached down and tickled him behind his horns for a minute, and he seemed to think things were all right again. He climbed back up to his perch and fluffed out his feathers for the night. I said, "Goodbye, old owls. You look after each other. Someday, maybe I'll be back." And here's a note from the author that you could read. I hope that you enjoyed reading about Owls in the Family by Farley Mowat. I'd love for you to write a prediction down of whether you think Billy ever comes back to visit his owls at the fox farm. I sure hope that he does. You could write when Billy comes back, how old he might be, or what might happen whenever he comes back to visit. I hope that you'll read all the other chapters in Owls in the Family and that you enjoyed this book by Farley Mowat.